Hey y'all, what's happening? What's happening? Listen, man, when that bass part comes in, I feel like I'm getting ready to hear Men in Black. Here come the men.
It does resemble it though.
Yeah. What's happening, everybody? Happy Wednesday to you. I am Robert Kennedy III, RK3. That's me. And to my left, we got my man. Go ahead, say.
Christopher Bartley here in the building. We out here. You know you're right, because you got to do the reverse, right? So yeah.
Yeah. Welcome to another Wednesday, the Storytellers show. This has been so fabulous, so much fun. My man David Hunt is in the heezy, just sharing along with us. So thank you for hanging out with us, David. We appreciate you, brother. It's been an amazing few weeks, and we've gotten some great feedback on the show and just really all of the different things that we've shared. So for those of you who are logging in for the very first time, this is the Storytellers show. And really what we talk about and what we have been talking about has been just the breakdown of what stories are, what storytelling is, and how you can utilize it as a tool to create even more impact, influence, and alliteration, inspiration, impact, influence, inspiration. How about that?
Love it.
So we've been breaking stuff apart, man. We've been in a good way. We've been pulling some things apart and really sharing the elements of storytelling and why storytelling. So this week, as we promised from last week, we're going to hop into some of the models that you can use. And why is the model important? Well, I was going to make a snarky comment there, but let me stay away from that. Let me stay away from that. I was gonna get into like the runway and America's Next Top Model. But no, let's stay away from that.
Touche.
Yeah. So why is this stuff important? Well, I think it's like when you go to the shoe store, right? You go into a shoe store and there are different cabinets, different counters, different aisles. And each of the different aisles has different types of shoes. Some of them are dress shoes that you might wear with a suit. Some of them are sneakers that you might wear with a suit, depending on what kind of vibe you're going for. Some of them are boots. And if you're from New York City, like I am, you might see Timbs or Timberlands, right? Yeah. And so that can go with anything. You can wear them with shorts. You can wear them with jogging pants. You can wear anything. But
that only works. That only works in New York City.
Yes, absolutely. But the point here is that for every aisle, there is something in that aisle, and each of them has a different purpose. So if I go into the aisle and I buy Timbs, I'm probably not going to be running a 100-yard sprint in those, right? That's probably not what I'm
although y'all folk
doing.
Be running in them Timbs, though.
Yeah. So that's what we're talking about today. I mean, we talked about the different types of stories, but can you use the same story for every situation? Or are there models that help you to predict, okay, listen, I'm going into this situation. I'm going into that scenario. I'm going into a conference room. I'm doing a conference room presentation. I'm doing a big auditorium presentation. I'm doing an interview. I'm doing something with a small group of people. And it's not a sales presentation. It's just informative. What types of stories do I use in order to create more influence and impact in those situations? So my man Chris, he is the storytelling guru as far as breaking all this stuff down. So,
you can't be slinging out words like that. But
pressure.
No pressure at all. So before we dive in, RK3, let's talk about the models that we hit on last week. I better check last week because this is going to inform what we're talking about this week. So you have actual story types, and then you have story shapes, okay? And what we dealt with last week were 4 different types of stories. We had the founder story. I love how, RK, what you did was you attached the question to the kind of story. So the founder story is the when. When did this happen? And, and all of that. The next one was the value story. What are you trying to provide, your service or your product? Then we had the customer story, which deals with the who. Right. That's the testimonials. And then the last one was the help me out, RK. What was the last one? We had the founder story, the value story, the customer story. There was one more story, the purpose story. Of course, what's your why? And that was the 4. So now in this today, we're gonna say, okay, you use a founder story or you use a value story, which is the most common one for a lot of brand messaging and marketing. But how are you going to tell that story? And this is now no longer the what. Let's say use a value story, but now how are you going to tell it? So let's bring that up. I'm going to bring up the first example. And while RK is bringing this up, you need to understand the components of what the story needs to have. You can have a beautiful shape, but if you don't have these elements, it's not going to work. You need identifiable characters. You need people, like not your product, not your service. It has to center around the actual person. Okay. So that person comes with emotion. It comes with pain. It comes with problems. So from there, you need to then have a moment. What is the thing that changes everything in the story? All right. It needs to have a moment. You need specific details. And these are details that will help people to familiarize themselves with the story so that it's co-creation that's happening. They can say, oh, yeah, I can see myself in the story that they're talking about. And then obviously, the last thing is it's got to have a conclusion. It's got to have a solution. So the first story type is man in the hole. I'm just going to draw this out. And as you look here, you've got what's considered good fortune, all right, on the y-axis, and bad fortune or ill fortune, okay? And then think of this as like a timeline, beginning and end. This is how the story begins. Person probably, just an individual, let's call him John, begins in good fortune, and then something terrible happens, and then he works his way out of it, and he ends back in good fortune, all right? This is usually where people want to be, obviously, at the end. Now, with this example, this kind of story works for, there's a normality, something that's normal, then there's a problem, and then there's a solution. Okay, so you want to keep your stories as simple as possible. And this is typically the best way. I want to just kind of move over here if I can. Most times, this bottom piece right here is going to be where you have the problem. But there's something that's happening when you're in good fortune. Something transitions at this point, and this is where you need to start talking about the realities of whether it's a business or maybe it's a leader. Maybe this person was a great leader, and then all of a sudden a scandal happens. And now you guys got to work out of, right? And now you guys got to work out of, okay, how do we not spin, but authentically share something about what has happened so that we can get this individual or the company, because maybe you have to remove the individual depending on how bad it is, to get back into good graces with our clients or stakeholders. And so the way that you would do that is not talk about the person as much as you could. This is just an idea, guys. Talk about a scenario where something similar might have happened and how the company is going to work on getting out of let's just call this, for instance, let's just call this part, the bad fortune would be out of the skepticism, out of the defamation, out of all of the negative perception of your customers, of your clients, of your stakeholders, and what you're going to do to get them to trust you again. Do you see how that works, guys? So what you want to do is, if you're talking about a story, let's say, especially if it's for a crisis, you want to bring the person who is engaging with this into a story that they can resonate. Oh yeah, we remember that. We remember that scandal. We remember that company. Or we remember what you guys have done. Okay, now that you're here, here's what as a company we choose or what we are going to do in order to get you out of that. This is what we are committed to do. This is what we're committed to fixing. Here's the problem with a lot of social media post today, Rob, is that they just have these, and they could be authentic, but a lot of times, they're PR apologies. But the apology doesn't speak to what we've done and how we're getting out of it. It stays right here. It's the, hey, I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry if I offended you, or if anyone was offended by this, I'm sorry. But you're not really sorry. You're just like, just in caveat. Okay.
Right.
In case,
right.
In case,
I don't want to get canceled.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
This is when you stay in just I'm sorry and I apologize mode, you're just staying in and wallowing in the story or the moment that things just went bad. You have to, as a leader or as a company, figure out ways. And it has to be authentic though. How do we regain the company, the clients or the customers' trust again? What do we do how are we getting out of this hole? Okay, so that's the first one. Let's go to the next one here. The next one is boy gets girl. Now, this one, oh, and by the way, all of these are from Kurt Vonnegut's Story Shapes. This one is a little bit more complex, but it's neutral beginning. Boy finds a person that he really likes, and then something happens. He dropped the ball. He done messed up, and he finds a way to get her again. That is, you guys can see how different this is from The Man in the Hole, where good fortune, bad fortune, good fortune. Here, he's experiencing, and let me just switch over here. He's experiencing elation. He's attained something awesome and amazing. In the previous one, let me go back. Nothing has really happened. This is business as usual, but then something traumatic has occurred, and now you have to get back here. Here is where things really get interesting because there's a discovery. He's attained something beautiful. He's attained something awesome. In this case, it's a relationship. But then he or she has done something to sabotage that. And so once again, he now... Oh, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, no, I was going to say we are using boy meets girl or boy gets girl in this, but it could be also some other things. I'm looking back at the story of Michael Vick, right? So y'all remember Michael Vick came out of college and he tore up the NFL. Right. He was at this place where he had the world in his hands and he was the highest paid, one of the highest paid at his position. There was nobody that could stop Michael Vick until the dogfighting scandal. that was that big thing that took him down. And then after serving that, he had to rehab his image and work to get back to the National Football League, where he finally was able to do some stuff with the Steelers, the Jets, the Eagles, and finish his career in a place where, some people still kind of got on him for the scandal. But for the most part, he had moved past the immediacy and the trauma of that immediate moment.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up. These examples, just think of these as archetypes. It's just an easy way to remember it. The boy can be company, can be leader, can be an individual. The gets can be, attaining something. And once again, obviously, if the boy is an allegory, then obviously the girl would be as well. So some sort of achievement, some sort of milestone, some sort of status, position, success, and then it all goes away. But usually, and here's the key here, you have to just start describing the details as to why it started to go south. If you don't do that in any of the stories that you're explaining, especially let's say that you're a middle manager or you're just a manager in general, you're rallying your team and you want them, as sales now have declined on the floor, you want them to get out of this to back up here. You got to start talking about, well, what happened? And you can't ask the questions of what happened, guys? No. You have to start talking about what it was specifically. How did morale start to lower? How was the working conditions or the culture starting to become toxic that started to lower the sales on the floor, whatever the case is, whatever job that you have? And then once again, start working towards, okay, what are the steps that we're going to take in order to make this thing become successful again? Okay. So that's the second one. Here's the last one. This one is the most complex. Actually, I love doing this one, Rob. This one is called The Cinderella Story for obvious reasons. Cinderella. So she starts very much in bad fortune, opposite of Boy Meets Girl and Man in the Hole. She is here. And the reason why she starts here is because her mother dies. Her father remarries a violently tempered woman, but would be her stepmother. She also is now has relationships with two evil, well, not evil, but perhaps wicked, and the Disney movie shows that it's ugly stepsisters. Very different. Yes. Right. So she's below the good fortune line. But then the fairy godmother shows up. That's right here. And when she shows up, she gives her some shoes, she gives her some stockings, she gives her some mascara, she gives her a way of transportation for what? For the ball that's happening. And this is where she catapults into amazing and good fortune because she meets the prince. at the ball. But then I love how Vonnegut does this. He does the whole bong, bong, bong.
Yeah.
The grandfather clock strikes 12, and she actually ends up below where she was before. You know, oftentimes when you actually have tasted success, or you've tasted something that's been amazing, and then you usually drop farther along. Now, here's what happens next. She's now in prison, right? She is in all, for intents and purposes, she's in the attic, right? So she's in prison, and long story short, the prince comes to find her. He finds the slipper, because that's one thing that I didn't mention. So she leaves the slipper behind. He finds the slipper, and he eventually finds her, and they live happily ever after, forever and ever. Okay. So with this story, yet again, we have, you may be in a company position, whatever the case is, where you are starting in bad fortune. And then there are steps that might have come. Here is where the hero's journey really shines through, because the fairy godmother can technically be considered the mentor. They give you some tools, they give you some things that actually helps you to climb out of your fortune or your misfortune into a place where you are now positioned to do great things. But, and these are for most classic Western civilization stories, the story doesn't end there. There's another crisis or traumatic experience that happens that drops you even further than you were before. Right. And then you then get rescued. Now, you know, there's a whole nother, you know, we're not going to talk about the savior complex. We're not going to talk about that, Rob. But there is then someone in the hero's journey. It's called supernatural aid. There are things or people that come in your path to help you out of your bad fortune. Long story short, you don't do it on your own. Okay. And I just want to shift over here because, you know, my drawings are terrible. So here's just an example of the story shapes here that are written, where we have the man in the hole, we've got boy gets girl, and then we have the Cinderella story. And once again, just as a reminder, the stories or the titles are just for memory, but these particular titles, it doesn't literally have to be a man in a literal hole. It can be your business in bankruptcy, right? So once again, you know, you want to use these as story models to keep things simple. And I love what you used in the beginning, Rob, and then I'm gonna switch it up back over to you. What you said is that it helps you to predict what's happening. So, you know, I do business storytelling in healthcare, and with artificial intelligence that's coming in, and, you know, people are scared it's going to take over. It's not going to take over jobs, or certain jobs. But what it does is to help do what it's called predictive analytics. So with an amass of big data, information of people's health, it can actually say, based on somebody with diabetes, these are the particular treatments that they're going to need. And this is probably what's going to happen to them based on the treatments that's given, because they're amassing so much pattern data that's coming in. You want to be able to do the same thing with your storytelling. You want to be able to have a model. Now that you've chosen the type, have a model that says, okay, how and what is the best way to convey the message, the data, the information, the inspiration in a way that's going to identify the character, create that magic moment. It can be positive or negative, the moment that shifts things, and then the new normal. How are things going to be different as a result of the moment that's occurred? So, yeah.
So let's talk for a second. So we've got these three main types here, man. So what is it that determines, or what story I utilize? Is it, do I just kind of write them down and say, okay, there's a Cinderella, there's a man in the hole, there is boy meets girl, or boy gets girl relationship? What is my Cinderella story? Do I have that? Do I just kind of categorize that? Or is it something where I say, I'm heading into this type of meeting, I'm heading into this situation? A Cinderella story would really work well here, as opposed to the man in the hole journey. What makes the difference?
You have to, and obviously the answer is it depends, right? So there's specific factors that come into play. And I think the best way to determine what those differences are is start with the problem. What is the problem that you're trying to convey or trying to solve? So, for instance, great example, Cinderella, there's a whole bunch of problems that she has, right? It's not just the fact that she's in this toxic family or this dysfunctional family, but she meets somebody and then she loses them. Right. She's also dealing with, so there are multiple factors that you have to take into consideration. If you have one problem that needs to be solved, don't make it complicated. Don't use the Cinderella story. Man in the hole will work. Right? Things are great. Things are terrible. Things will be great again. How? Let's talk about that. Once again, if you have a more of a nuanced dynamic where there's a rise and a fall, where things are great because we've achieved or we've attained something, we've lost it due to our own failure, negligence in some way. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to come back around to attain it again. Use the boy gets girl model. And obviously the Cinderella model is a little bit more nuanced, but once again, it's still to explain that there are, you are starting already in bad fortune. So, and I love the fact that you would use, or the way that you would use the Cinderella model is, if you already realize that you are starting in a negative place, you aren't going to get out of it magically in just one exponential graph, right? The sine graph, I don't even know which graph it is, but the mathematical graph that goes up, right? The exponential graph. It's not going to happen that way. There's usually some steps. There's usually another fall, a predictive crisis that you can map out, and then there's going to be the quote unquote savior or event or person or something that comes along the way to help you, or system or strategy that's going to help get you out of that thing. So now I know that it's a little bit nebulous, it still seems, because what we haven't done, Rob, is we haven't contextualized it to an actual value story, right? A product or service, or to a founder, right? Or to a customer. So that's like, we've left a lot today out, because you have to determine what is that story type that you're going to use first. We'd be here for another hour just talking about how the Cinderella fits into each of the 4 story types that we talked about. But you don't have the time for that. But yeah, you have to start with, let's do that.
Let's start with one.
Which one do you want to start with?
So let's start with, I think the one that is, so if we're dealing with small business owners, let's start with the founder story.
Okay, cool. And this is interesting. I think it would actually be inverted. So instead of man in the hole, what we do is we do like an inverted hill, where and I just finished one today where financial consultant is starting with her backstory of, coming out of a single parent home, mother's hardworking, and she has adopted the values of independence, resilience, because she's seen her mother working 2 jobs. However, the hard work doesn't equate to financial success. It really equates to survival. And so what she does is, and this is the next thing that's happening, is she decides to say, okay, you know what I'm going to do is help other people, as I'm now been exposed to financial education. I want to help other people out of that. So that's, if we're using man in the hole, that's still kind of, kind of above fortune. Nothing's negative happening just yet. But then she says, okay, the best way for me to do this, I've gotten this taste. I've seen people like Warren Buffett. He doesn't inherit his wealth. He builds his wealth. What's going to happen now is, I think stock market is like the place to do that. I think that I can reach the majority of the people if I can amass that wealth myself. Cool. She then gets into, this is a real story. She gets a job offer to a Fortune 100 financial company. Blows her mind. She's excited. Man in the hole begins to happen, because it's not the job that she thought it was going to be. Toxic environment. Not only is she a woman, but she's a woman who's black. Not only is she a woman who's black, but she's an LGBT. So now you have all of these not complications, but all of these factors that prevents or that creates complications for her in the actual job. So how does she get out of this hole? Because her clients love her, but the employer or her coworkers may not. And so there's this deep tension. She quits. Now, she doesn't quit out of frustration. She quits in a strategic manner. She leaves the job, but she doesn't leave the industry. She ends up becoming an independent contractor for companies so that she can actually have ownership of her clients. She's starting to creep up past the good fortune. And not only that, I'm adding a little piece of Cinderella here. She realizes, now that I have my own business, I can't do everything myself. And because I have the core values of mastery and excellence and education, even though I can learn and do these things, I don't have the time. So it drops down just a little bit more, right? And then she realized, okay, what I need to do is I need to let go and trust people in their expertise, just like other people are trusting me in mine. It goes back up again above good fortune. And now she has a network of individuals and resources that she can connect with so that she can do what she does best, helping her clients. And they can do what they do best, marketing, bookkeeping, all the other things that make the business work. Lesson, she says, I need to learn how to work on my business and not just work in my business. She's now in good fortune. So that's just one example, literally, like it's fresh, 2 hours ago. It just happened, where you can kind of invert that model into a man in the hole, where you start off in good fortune. There's some things that happen, but how do you work your way out to get back into good fortune again? So
nice.
I hope that was a good one.
Yeah. So let me go through this question here. Karen Morgan is asking, someone asked her to collaborate on a biography, but she doesn't yet have the details. How does she know what path to use? So I think based on the story types that we've talked about so far, Cinderella, Man in the Hole, and what was the other one? Boy Gets Girl. Boy Gets Girl, right? How does she know what path to use? And I think it's the same answer like we've been saying before. It depends, right? Yeah. It depends. I mean, what is the biography? Are you collaborating on their biography? Are you collaborating on your biography? Are you, what's happening here? Yeah. What level or what piece of the biography are you coming in on? Because sometimes when people write biographies, they're not starting at birth necessarily. Nope. They might start after college, right? And so what happened before college, or what happened to lead up to the college thing? So you might be starting at that Man in the Hole stage, right? You come out of college and everything's cool. You're living life. You got your first job, blah, blah, blah. Then all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, my college degree stinks. I hate it. This career, I hate it. And then you're going along, you're doing it. And then because you hate it, you're not doing your best work. And so you get fired. Ooh. Right. So we're down and you're at the bottom of this hill now. And now you have this thing. You've got to now figure out, okay, I can either stay here and roll around, or I can find something that I love. I can find something that's going to make me useful. So you go back to school, or you take this course, or you do something and you find a mentor, or you find something, you find an internship, and you're like, wow, I shouldn't be doing an internship. I'm 30 years old. Right. So I've got these things called bills. So now you're kind of saying, okay, you're going through that valley experience, and now you do the internship and you get noticed by somebody, and okay, so now I'm starting to come back up that hill. And then as you do this internship, you're like, wait a minute, I can start a business. People are starting to ask you about stuff. So you start the business, and so that's that Man in the Hole journey that we're just talking about. So it really depends, Karen, on where this biography is beginning, and maybe the information that you already have. I mean, there's some journeys. Why am I forgetting this story type? It's the one that it never really, it doesn't have a happy ending or anything like that. It's like the up and the down, It's
there's one that's called, I think it's like Kafka, but there's one that's like just totally nihilistic, where it starts in bad fortune and it ends in bad fortune. I didn't add that one there, but I will say this for Karen as well, that biographies are a little bit interesting. They're a little bit tricky as well, because each chapter of this person's life could be a different story model. So you can have a Man in a Hole in one chapter, but a Cinderella in another chapter. And this is where we start differentiating between stories and a narrative. So if this biography is a narrative, then it's going to be a set of stories. And each of those stories may contain a different story type and a story model. But if it's an actual story, if it's just about their college life, or if it's just about their upbringing, which it probably, based on what you're saying, is not, then my suggestion would be to use a broader story model like the hero's journey. That's what we talked about last week, where it kind of encompasses the entire process. And then you can start getting granular with, okay, the types of models and everything like that. But if it's going to be something that's overarching, like a person's life, then as a journey, my suggestion would be to use the monomyth, or Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. Or if you want to be even more cinematic, use Christopher Vogler's. I think it's like a 2007 model, which is like a 9-point version of Joseph Campbell's 17 stages. You can narrow it down to just 9. So it really depends on how sophisticated the biography is going to be.
Yeah. So, I mean, Christopher's just rolling through some of these theoretical and structural approaches, right? And y'all are like, Vogue, who? Right? So here's the deal.
I gotta do better.
And here, no. Stretch us, brother. Stretch us. So the reason, again, why we're sharing this type of stuff. I mean, here's what happens with a lot of people. You've got this presentation that you've got to do. You've got a live stream that you got to do. You've got a video that you've got to do. And we get stuck, right? We think about, okay, I turn on the camera or I turn on the mic, then what? I know kind of what I want to say, but I kind of screw up the beginning and I screw up the middle, and then the end is like a nightmare, right? Because when you speak, when you present, when you tell stories, they're really two critical pieces, especially when you're doing this verbally. The opening, that hook, and then that landing the plane, the end, the close.
Yeah,
man, if you blow that, I mean, you could have, it's like going to a movie. Imagine going to a movie and the middle of the movie is fabulous. You're like, whoa, this is great. And then the end, you're like, wait a minute. That was terrible. Did I just waste like half of my money? I mean, what just happened? What just happened? Yeah. I mean, I almost felt that way about, and I'm a big superhero buff for those of you who don't know. I almost felt that way about, was it Avengers Infinity War? The one where
everybody just started disappearing?
Thanos? Yeah. Dude, I was so upset.
I'm laughing because I thought of Game of Thrones. People were upset about season 8.
Yeah.
The last season, they were so disappointed. But yeah, definitely resonate with that. Man, Rob, it's already 4:30.
Oh man. Oh wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Listen. Yeah. Well, listen, y'all, we've been having, I mean, wow, we lose track of time. We've just been rolling on this thing. And I think over the last 3 weeks, if you've not been hanging with us, then number one, you've missed out on a lot of stuff. But if you have been hanging with us, there's been just so much that I know that you've learned, I've learned, and I'm also rethinking some stuff as I go, or as we go through this process. And again, why we really want you to hang with us and really go through this information is because the more that you can pull from, it's like a library, right? If I'm in the library, I have no reason to not have knowledge because the books are right there. All right. I can grab stories at any point because the books are right there. But if I'm standing out in the middle of the street, then I don't really have anything to pull from. So this is the library. We want you to have access to frameworks and structures and blueprints that you can leverage to become an even more influential and impactful storyteller. And not just a storyteller, but a communicator overall. Because yeah, that's the big thing. I think when I deal with my communication sessions, I pull out the story of Warren Buffett all the time, right? And Warren Buffett, even after he became a billionaire, when he spoke, he said he would say to people, he visited, was at Stanford University one day, and he's speaking to them, and he said the thing that made the biggest difference in his life was the day that he paid $100 to a guy selling a Dale Carnegie public speaking course. As a matter of fact, he tells the story this way. He says that he was in college and he knew that he needed to become a better public speaker. He knew that he needed to connect with people better. And so there was a guy selling this Dale Carnegie public speaking course. And so he wrote a check for $100 and he gave it to the guy. He got so freaked out, he called the bank and put a stop payment on the check and canceled it. And so he never took the course. And it was maybe about 7 or 8 years. He got into his career, he got into business, and he knew and he saw that he was struggling. He saw that there was some people that were getting ahead. And the reason that they were getting ahead was because they were great communicators. And he's like, listen, I've got to do this differently. I've got to do something differently. So fate had it that he ran into another person that was selling the Dale Carnegie public speaking course. And this time he got cash and he gave him cash. You can't put a stop payment on cash. Right. So he gave him cash, signed up for the day, and went and took the course. And he said, listen, that's been the best $100. That's been the $100 investment that has made the biggest difference in his life and in his business. So we're talking about storytelling. We're talking about public speaking. We're talking about communication. We're talking about these things because we believe that it's going to make a big difference in how you impact, influence, and inspire. What you got to say, brother? How you going to close us out? I'm putting the pressure on. Man. How about I just start playing some music?
Go ahead and fade me out. There was no other way. I think that was the best way, the best investment that he ever made. I remember that. And I would simply say this: keep it simple. Keep the story simple. You want people to empathize and then to act based on the story that you're giving. The data is going to be there, but if they don't remember the story, all of the information in it is going to be lost. Keep it simple, and you'll catch them.
Love it. Listen,
we're gonna go with that.
Exactly. We have been we did it 4 o'clock this week, but our normal time is 1 p.m. on Wednesdays. So today's the 24th. Let me hit my calendar real quick. Next week, Wednesday, is the 31st. Ooh, my goodness. So we'll be back to our regular time. You down for 1 o'clock again on the 31st? We good?
Good.
Let's do it. Let's do it. March 31st, next week, Wednesday, we're going to continue on with these story models and just really sharing with you what types of stories you can be using. I want to share with you about signature stories. I've got some secrets about signature stories that we want to share the next time as well. So let's do this thing, y'all. As I say at the end of every one of my shows, everything that happens to you in life is your stuff. Your stuff is your story, and your story deserves a stage. I'll see y'all. CB will see y'all. There we go. That side. All right. We'll see y'all next week. Have an awesome rest of your week.